Get Rich Education is brought to you by Norada Real Estate, the real asset investor, and Mid-South homebuyers.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Hey, welcome to GRE. This is Get Rich Education, episode 122. Hi, I'm Keith Weinhold, back to help you build your wealth. And we're doing it with passive buy and hold real estate investing today as usual, but with an unusual twist, and that is how and why you might want to invest in a resort and how to invest in a resort in an all-done-for-you way with a world-class team that I know personally. That is today's show, and I'm here in Anchorage, Alaska today. Next week, I will be doing kind of Get Rich Education, the Puerto Rican edition. That's when I'll be in sunny San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I expect to do a show from there about how you can best be positioned as an investor when a real estate market goes down in value. Now, that's something that a lot of people aren't thinking about now when most metro markets have been sunny side up for years now, but I want you to be prepared. And while I'm there in Puerto Rico, I expect to meet up with economist Harry Dent, but I'm primarily going to be there for leisure. I'll be in the Eastern Caribbean for 2 weeks. Today, let's talk about investing in another warm, sunny place. Now, we've had shows about turnkey real estate investing in the United States, and it's usually single-family homes that we're discussing there. Oftentimes there, you're serving a millennial demographic, whom is now the largest generation in America. Well, with resort investing, you're often serving baby boomers, whom are the second largest generation in America and often the most moneyed, if you will. So it gives you an opportunity to diversify by serving a different generational age cohort. And you know what retirees are doing? They're increasingly retiring out of the country like they never have before outside the United States. But, often they're not looking to move too far out of the country. That way they can easily fly home and see the family, or the family can come down and visit them. Well, there's one such place that checks all of those boxes and more, and that is the small Central American nation of Belize, a nation of fewer than 400,000 people that has a long Caribbean coastline to the east. Now, today our guest and I will discuss the why Belize question some more, but I can tell you that question was satisfactorily answered for me years ago, and in 2013, I began investing in Belize real estate myself on the island of Ambergris Caye, Belize. Now, as you know, I'm a big advocate for direct investing, but I understand that at times you kind of need an alternative to that because often, for one thing, in foreign markets, you can't get financing, or for others, there might be financing in a market, but one can't take advantage of that financing due to your debt-to-income ratio or your credit score or a number of other reasons. Today, we're discussing a market where effectively there are no loans, or at least none with good terms, no leverage. So we have sort of a bridge to make that, more approachable for you. When we think about investing outside U.S. borders, all right, you might embrace that because you like diversification, or you might fear that because to you that entails risk, typically risk in the form of fear of the unknown, okay? Now, Robert Helms, whom is the real estate field trip tour guide in Ambergris Caye, I'm calling him sort of the project sponsor there at the resort, and the same person who first guided me there. Okay, I like the way that he discusses his experience when talking to a room full of Americans about foreign investing. He asks the room, okay, now who thinks investing outside of the country that you're most familiar with is risky? And then a certain number of hands go up. And then the next thing he asks is, who thinks having all of your real assets tied up in just one nation's economy and currency is risky when there are about 200 nations in the world? And then a different set of hands goes up, okay? With the island of Ambergris Caye, Belize, it's a place that is rapidly becoming more popular for both overnight tourists and retirees. Yet it just doesn't feel too touristy when you're there. When I'm in San Pedro, which is the largest town on the island of Ambergris Caye, Belize, kids walking home from school are just kind of playing around on the docks. People are out spearfishing right next to the restaurant where you just finished eating lunch, okay? You don't have this segregation between locals and bubble-dwelling tourists, well, at least when you're in the town proper on the island, okay? The San Pedro Town Council, what they do is they also limit the height of any structure, so no structure is as tall as the typical height of a coconut palm tree. And what that does is it lends itself to an atmosphere of a more tranquil and relaxing place when the skyline is not dominated with development, okay? And you won't find one Hard Rock Cafe or Senior Frogs on the whole island, or the whole country for that matter. In fact, when Robert Kiyosaki first landed on Ambergris Caye, Belize a few years ago, he simply said, "I didn't know that a place like this still exists." So now just imagine that you were able to invest in Hawaii in the 1960s before the prices ran up uncontrollably, and now they've been far out of reach for most people. Well, is this opportunity in Belize the same as that? Well, I mean, of course, it's not exactly the same, but you can kind of make that comparison and consider, too, that Ambergris Caye, Belize is actually closer to much more of the U.S. population than Hawaii is. And you've got indicators to validate that, like the airlines, Delta, American, United, Copa, and Southwest. They're all adding more flights and seats to Belize at a steady clip in order to meet that demand. Let's meet today's guest, whom is actually with us at the not yet completed resort yet. It's called Mahogany Bay Village on the island of Ambergris Caye, Belize. Today's guest has been a successful investor and entrepreneur for most of his adult life. With real estate holdings in many states and nations, he specializes in multifamily apartments in the U.S. and resort development in Belize. Since 2009, he's bought more than $60 million worth of real estate, really making him one of the most successful real estate syndicators in the entire United States. With over 2,300 units in his portfolio, he's a published author and a guest speaker based in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Dave Zook.
Keith, thanks for having me on Get Rich Education.
It's good to have you here again. You're not in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania today, however. Tell us where you are.
My family and I are in Ambergris Caye, Belize, when we're staying at Mahogany Bay Village.
Yeah, and that is a resort, and you're involved with a resort investment there. So why resort investing of all things, Dave?
Well, for your listeners, a few months ago when I was on your show, Keith, we talked about C-class multifamily assets that I own and syndicate. And so they may be wondering, well, how did I get from C-class assets to A-class resort property? And I can answer that in several different ways. But I was looking for an international option before I got connected with Belize for diversification and to catch a ride on a demographic shift that I believe will be happening in the next decade or two. And then just because I got introduced to a great project in Belize by a really good team of people that I know, like, and trust.
Well, you bring up diversification, and a lot of times people think about diversification in the metro that they invest in, and they usually think about that in terms of a different U.S. domestic metro, but there's also diversification outside the country. Now we're dealing with a different currency, now we're dealing with a different government, and now we're dealing with a different demographic. If you go from C-class apartment buildings, you're serving one type of tenant, and you're diversified among those clients that you serve if you're serving resort tenants elsewhere. So of all things, I think a lot of people want to ask, though, however, why choose Belize? Tell us about that.
So there was just a ton of reasons. As I was doing my due diligence for diversification and an international option, one of the places we stopped was the Cayman Islands. And when I realized that the number one or the only one commodity that was being manufactured and shipped off the island was rum cake, that sort of said, you know what, I don't think this is for me. So one of the things that really intrigued me, or one of the questions that I asked early, was, Belize, are they self-sustaining? What do they manufacture? Do they export? Do they have like a self-sustainable lifestyle for people that live here? Because when it all comes down to it, Belize checked a bunch of boxes for me. I mean, not only do I have a place that I feel safe investing, but I also have a place that I can go to and spend some time and enjoy here. There was a couple things that I really like about Belize that are not readily available in neighboring countries down here. And, one of them is the English language. This is one of the highest projected growth places in the world, is right here in the Caribbean. So when I look at Belize being right here in the Caribbean, and I look at who's attracted to this market, I mean, it's, heavily Americans and Canadians. What's going to be some things that are important to them? And English language is one of them. English language, I mean, it's important to me. Years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I brought the whole family down here, and I tried to pack in as much sort of education that I could for the whole family. So we started in Cancun. We flew to Cancun. We stayed at a all-inclusive resort. It's really, developed and commercialized up there. I wanted to give them that feel. Then we hopped on a bus and we drove 4 hours down through Mexico. We stopped a couple times. We kind of got a feel of the culture and the feel of what was going on in the villages. Got down to the border with Belize. And when we crossed the border, and you can now read the road signs, you can read the menus, you can talk to people. It was really a breath of fresh air. And I think a lot of Americans and Canadians are going to feel the same way when they go to figure out, okay, where do we want to invest? Where do we want to maybe retire? Where do we want that offshore diversification option? I think that's going to be a big one.
Belize is the former British Honduras. It was British Honduras until the early 80s, so that's why English-speaking persists there. And yeah, like you mentioned, you have the road signs in English, you have the menus in English, and you have, importantly, the real estate contracts in English. Now, in some Central American nations, you have real estate contracts that are in Spanish, and there might be an English translation, but you might lose a little something in the translation. You don't have that in Belize. In Belize, you have relatively close proximity to the United States. It's a 2-hour flight from Houston. It's a 2-hour flight from Miami, so that you're nearby, so that you can use the property, and Americans can use the property, and it's a lot easier for them. And as Dave kind of alluded to, overnight tourist arrivals there in Belize are just increasing at such a great rate that you really have this supply-demand imbalance. So tell us a little bit more about that, Dave.
And you mentioned the close proximity to the United States. That's another big one. I mean, I spend a couple weeks down here in the wintertime. Last year, we were here for 9 weeks. This year, we're here for 3 weeks. We brought a tutor down with us to teach the kids right here at MBV. We got a little room set aside for the kids in our classroom. But, what's nice for me is my team back at the office, they're on Eastern time. I'm on Central time. So, there's an hour difference. We're doing business at the same time. I can communicate with them. It's, they're not in the office when I'm sleeping, and I'm not in the office when they're sleeping. So that's a big one. As far as supply-demand imbalance that we've kind of seen take place here over the last couple of years. I mean, you're looking from 2011 to 2016, the increased overnight tourism arrivals have increased by 55%. And then when you look at what's been built in that time period, you see all of the market drivers, you see the different flights that have been added, and you can kind of tell about how many more rooms would have been needed. Well, there has been about 990 rooms needed to keep up with demand, and only about 80 or 90 have been built. And here's something even more important is, we talked about desirability. So you got a lot of people coming down here. You got a lot of baby boomers coming down here. There's over 11,000 baby boomers per day adding to that number. And even if just a small increase or even just a small percentage of those people start looking overseas, like, where do we want to go? They start buying, and we've seen this happen over the last 5 years. They've been coming to the market and they start buying inventory that was being rented out to tourists. We're kind of sabotaging our own inventory, and the inventory is shrinking. So, you have about 1,800 rooms in the marketplace that, have been historically been rented out to overnight tourist guests. That inventory is being gobbled up by Americans and Canadians coming down to this market.
And when Dave's talking about this market, now he's talking specifically about Ambergris Caye, Belize. Ambergris Caye is the largest of the Belizean islands. 70% of tourists that come to Belize go to Ambergris Caye, so it's by far the greatest tourist draw. So beyond just the nation of Belize that has this great history of bank stability and this great history of you having full property rights because property ownership is per British common law, the island of Ambergris Caye, which is just about a 15-minute flight east out of Belize City, that island is an island that TripAdvisor has named the #1 island in the world at least 2 years in a row. I know 2014 and 2015, Ambergris Caye, Belize was named the #1 island for tourists in the world. And that's pretty impressive. If you know anything about TripAdvisor, it's not just one columnist's opinion. That's the opinion of a collection of users. So that really means something in the market. So just tell us a little bit more about the culture of Ambergris Caye and Ambergris Caye's largest town there, San Pedro, and why San Pedro and Ambergris Caye are so appealing to tourists, Dave.
Yeah, well, you mentioned TripAdvisor, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, you're talking about 80 million people. You're talking about the people that actually come to this market are casting their vote. And they're saying, when TripAdvisor comes back and counts the votes, I mean, they're saying that Ambergris Caye, Belize was the #1 island in the world. And, we've gotten quite a bit more of that happening. And we feel like that's a big part of why sort of Belize is really now just in the last couple of years, it's kind of showing up on people's radars because it was, 10, 15 years ago, it was a quiet little fishing village. And now you're starting to hear about it with TripAdvisor. 2 years in a row, they called it the #1 island in the world. A national magazine is calling it the #1 place in the world to retire to. You get a lot of those types of mentions. And, Huffington Post, is calling it the one place you must get to and vacation before it gets famous. You get a lot of those kind of organizations start talking about a place that hasn't been on the map before. We feel like that has a lot to do with why the tourism increased by 55% over the last couple of years.
Just hundreds of yards off the island of Ambergris Caye, you have the largest living barrier reef in the world, and that gives great opportunities for fishing, for snorkeling, and for diving, and that's a big draw for people. Now, back on the island itself, the main mode of transportation on Ambergris Caye, Belize are golf carts. So it adds this great, quaint feel. And you have main paved streets there in the island of Ambergris Caye. And a lot of the side streets, I would say most of the streets, are compacted beach sand there. So that just tells you a little bit more about the character of Ambergris Caye, Belize. But tell us about the project that you're involved in there specifically, Dave, and why that project.
You mentioned about the barrier reef. That is one of the things. Not only does it really make it or help make it in the top 3 consistently places in the world for water sports like fishing, like diving, like snorkeling, it's consistently in the top 3 places in the world where you must go to do that if you're a serious diver or fisherman. The other thing that it does is it provides a natural protection for the island itself. So you just imagine this. Most of the damage, storm damage, is caused by storm surge, big waves coming on shore. You get high winds and you get big waves come on shore and they do the damage. Well, what happens is just a quarter to a half mile away from the beach, and you can actually see where the waves are breaking at the barrier reef. You got a half a mile high seawall that acts as a natural protector for the island. It doesn't allow that big storm surge to build and come in and wreak havoc on land. So that was a big one. But being attracted to the Mahogany Bay Village, you're familiar with the philosophy of figuring out who you are as an investor and then figuring out where you want to go, picking out the market where you want to invest in, and then finding the team and then have that team help you find the asset. It's sort of in that order. I got introduced to the Memphis market through Robert and Russ, the real estate guys. And so we did a couple deals together, and I really liked those guys. And they sort of had a history of whoever they would introduce me to turned out to be, most of those guys really turned out to be good guys and good partners and team members. So when they invited me to come to Belize and see what they were up to, I was like, well, hey, if you guys are down there, well, sure, I'll come look at it. And that was in 2012, I think. So I've been here ever since. So I'm a real proponent of, I want to do my research on the asset itself. I want to do the research on the asset class and what's going on, under the covers and all that. But I spend way more time on figuring out, okay, who's the team? So that's what really attracted me to this place.
That's every bit as important as the project itself. And beyond just tourists, it's baby boomers and others that are looking to relocate there, and you have so much more demand than you do supply. Well, what do you do when you have so much more demand than supply? If you want to serve that market, you have to build new construction. So when Dave and I come back, we're going to talk about the project itself. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Dave Zook. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
Are you on track to achieve your financial goals? Income-producing real estate is the most historically proven way to accumulate wealth and has created more financial freedom than any other means. Norada Real Estate provides everything you need to invest in the best turnkey cash flow rental properties. Our simple, proven system will help you create real wealth and passive monthly income. Get your free strategy session with our knowledgeable investment counselors at noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
As a lot of investors know, multifamily real estate has been one of the best asset classes to be invested in most of the last decade. While the great deals have been harder to find lately, there are still opportunities in select markets where savvy investors can get lots of appreciation and strong cash flow if you have a great team. Dave Zook, founder and president of The Real Asset Investor, and his team have been very active in the multifamily space in Memphis, Tennessee. On the heels of the Great Recession of 2009, Dave and his team quietly started acquiring multifamily assets, and in the last few years, he has syndicated over 2,000 apartment units, creating strong cash flow streams and big appreciation for lots of their investors. It's not too late to get involved. If you're an accredited investor and you would like to learn more about investing in great multifamily apartments with a world-class team, email Dave and his team at info@therealassetinvestor.com.
This is Profit Boss Radio's Hillary Hendershot. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education with our guest, the real asset investor, Dave Zook. So, Dave, in order to serve that market there, you basically had to go ahead and create new supply and new construction. And what's been done there is really just a remarkable hotel. And when people think about a hotel, I think they think about a big box, a big rectangle in the sky. But really, it's a village that's been created there with a lot of individual units and a town center and a coffee shop. And there's a real village feel there, hence the name Mahogany Bay Village. And you brought a lot of water proximity into the village as well. In fact, with the canals that have been excavated there, really one cannot live or have a place more than 75 feet from the water in that 300-room village. Tell us more about the village.
That is correct. Not only do you have, I think at this point it's like 200 individual homes that gives it kind of that village feel, but you're also going to have, and some of these shops are open right now, you're also going to have shops. I really feel like it's going to be a destination place. When you come to Ambergris Caye, Belize, you're going to want to come and spend some time at Mahogany Bay Village. We've got world-class sushi that's going to be open here in the next month or two. You've got great food being served on site here already. You don't have to go off property. You've got chocolate manufacturing. You've got fishing for the ladies. You got the hair and nails, the polish, where the ladies can go and get spiffed up. You've got a bunch of different food venues, and it really is. It's going to be a little village. We had soft opening in just last month or back in December, and we've had quite a few guests staying here, kind of invited guests or investors and their families, and to just be able to kind of get out here and walk around and visit the little shops that are open. And it's a nice little village feeling to it. And it's a lot of fun.
So we have a number of the units that are already occupied. What's the construction status? When are they going to be done?
So the units in phase one that we're opening the resort with, Street 3 is pretty much finished. The Belizean workforce scurrying around, painting a little bit here and touching up and doing their thing, but it's we're well on the way, and it'll be ready for the group that's coming down in the middle of this month.
Yeah, the village makes great use of the Belizean wood, the wood from the mainland of Belize there, and you also make a great use of Belizean labor, the local labor as well. And that way, really, the local government's bought into it. You've got business-friendly government officials, including the premier of Belize, which is basically the equivalent of the president, that has visited the project itself. So I've walked the grounds myself. It's really a class act. But tell us about how the opportunity for the investor comes in, Dave. If the investor wants to get a part of this resort class of sort of tenant or client that stays there, what does that opportunity look like for the investor?
Well, there's a couple ways an investor can get involved, and one is to just come down here and buy a lot. And when I say a lot, you're talking, the real estate, canal front real estate with 3 individual homes on it. You can come down and buy the lot yourself, and you're going to be looking at between $600,000 and $800,000. Or you can do what a lot of investors have done, and they've joined groups or syndications. And that's a lot of what we do here at the Real Asset Investor is we put these syndications together. And then you may have, 2 or 3 lots in a syndication. You may have 10, 15, 20 investors come together and all join the syndication and fund those 2 or 3 lots. So we've done a lot of that in the last couple of years. In fact, we've got a lot of my friends, a lot of my business associates back in Lancaster County have invested here. And our group is the lead investor here at Mahogany Bay Village, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, so that's a pretty advanced price point you mentioned there, $600K to $800K. And because you really cannot very well get financing as a U.S.-based investor or as an investor that resides anywhere outside of Belize, your ownership model through syndication does bring that price point down for that investor. Why don't you just explain that this is not a timeshare? Tell us a little bit more about sort of the lease term and the duration or the use of the property, or how an investor can use the property if they want to use it themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is not a timeshare. Whether you come down and buy a lot all by yourself, that property is deeded to you. It's your property. Obviously, if you choose to and you want to put it into the rental pool, it'll be managed by the hotel management company here on site. It doesn't matter if you go that route or into syndication, you're owning the real estate. And that's also something I didn't mention earlier about why Belize. There's a lot of the neighboring countries down here that are not British common law, and property rights by foreigners are not allowed. And you got to join a trust or a number of different ways, 100-year leases or something like that. Here, it's very similar to the United States. You own the real estate. It gets deeded to you personally. So you're right. It is not a timeshare. It's direct ownership. Keith, I also wanted to mention, you mentioned about no financing, and how when there's a problem in the marketplace, look back to 2008, 2009, we could have not built the portfolio of multifamily residents that we built with investors. And, so wherever there's problems, there's opportunities. And for us, we were able to get in there and build a portfolio of multifamily housing. We were able to help revitalize those neighborhoods. We were able to get in there and add value. We would have not been able to do that if there hadn't been some kind of turbulence in the marketplace and hadn't been a problem that we've been able to go in there and solve. So when we look at no financing in this marketplace, yeah, that can be a problem, but it can also be an opportunity. So I just mentioned, that you can buy a lot for $600,000 to $800,000. The interesting part about that is, right now, that same lot is being appraised by a third-party appraisal company, and that appraisal is coming in at $1.2 to $1.4 million. And there's a couple reasons for that. There's no financing in the marketplace. And the other thing is this resort hasn't been fully open to the public yet. And when it does in, late spring, early summer, when we have our full grand opening, those two things are going to change, the financing piece and, the world is going to now see it and know about Mahogany Bay Village. I feel like that price point, that $600,000 or $800,000 and the appraisal price of $1.2 to $1.4 million, I think that window of opportunity is going to close rapidly. And I think you're going to have some real appreciation here in the next year or two.
So we're talking about the fact that there is no financing. That means you can't get any leverage. And in a sense, that's too bad. I'm a leverage guy. Over time, in an appreciating environment, you get higher returns with leverage. Now, Dave is mentioning the opportunity that presents as well. You can buy at a price point when there is no leverage in a market. When they do add leverage in a market, well, that's going to increase the pool of available buyers because more people can now afford those properties where previously you would have had to pay cash for that and there were fewer buyers. So you likely want to purchase a property before leverage is introduced to a market, not afterward.
That's absolutely correct, Keith. And there is financing coming. we're having those conversations. There's banks courting us. This is an opportunity that's not going to be around 12 to 24 months from now. There's financing options from the United States that's coming here. So this isn't something that we're going to have to, the LTV isn't going to be 50% and the interest rate isn't going to be 10%, which is, sort of kind of the going rate here on the island. It's going to be much more attractive, and we're going to have financing in the very short term.
Okay, so what does the model look like then today for someone that wants to get in, and you can go ahead and help introduce the investor to the market, and you pool resources into syndication for an investor? Tell us a little bit about what that looks like. They have 100% ownership in one detached unit or part of a duplex type structure, or tell us more.
When you invest in a syndication, you're investing in a group of buildings or a number of lots, let's say 2 or 3 lots that consist of, say, 6 or 8 homes. So you're investing with a group, and the cash flow from that asset gets split up with the group, same as any other syndication. When I look at what's available out there in syndications or different asset classes you can invest in, I think it's the ultimate in appreciation, in cash flow, in diversification, and you also get some lifestyle. I mean, you can come down here, you can invest in a syndication, and at a certain level, you can actually even come down and use it, free of charge. There's different advantages to the syndication model. It's totally passive to the investor, but I like it, and so have a lot of my investors. This is kind of an interesting asset class and something that kind of totally different than the C-class multifamily. There's some pride of ownership down here for sure.
Belize property taxes are very low. Income tax on the rental income is also extremely low. And Dave mentioned the lifestyle use component. And, a lot of times that's something that you just don't get in your turnkey single-family home. You probably don't have the opportunity to use that. And even if you could, you may not want to. In this case, it's different. So there's a lifestyle investing component to this. And, you have to ask yourself a question as an investor, what do you really want over the long term? I don't really want every property that I have in my portfolio to be as boring as my Class C multifamily apartment building built in 1977 in Eagle River, Alaska. I really don't enjoy going over there and visiting the boiler room of that property, but it produces great cash flow. It's just that I cannot use it, and I don't so much enjoy going there to visit, because usually when I do, that means that there's some sort of problem. But imagine owning an investment that you might actually get some peaceful enjoyment from, either visiting it or having the ability to use it yourself.
It's a lot of fun to have investors come down and visit us, and it's one of the reasons we like to come down here and spend a couple weeks. I mean, in about 1 hour from now, we're going out to dinner with some investors that are down here to see us. And, that part of it is just a whole lot of fun when you can have people down here and visit you, and you've got some pride of ownership, and you're able to enjoy the investment, not only looking forward to the appreciation, the cash flow and all that, but you get some lifestyle component out of it. And, nobody has ever asked me to stay for a week in one of my C-class multifamily apartments, but I get a lot of interest down here in sunny Ambergris Caye, Belize, especially this time of the year for my friends back in PA.
Hotel management is more expensive than property management is for a multifamily apartment building, but once that's factored in with all the other expenses and the property tax, what does the cash flow or the cash-on-cash return look like for an investor there in Mahogany Bay Village?
Yeah, so typically what we've seen here on the island is you get a lot of 60-40 splits, 40% going to the management, 60% going to the investors. You even have some that are 50-50 split. Because the economies of scale, we got 200 homes here. We're the largest resort on the island. So we got some economies of scale. Here it's an 80-20 split. So on stabilization on paper, I mean, it's telling me that we're going to be looking at, say, double-digit returns, 10% and up. So it has a lot to do with, obviously, it has a lot to do with the occupancy. And we've got a strong team here that is, certainly on top of that. Let's talk about that team for a little bit. I mentioned early on how important that was to me and why I ended up even coming here. I knew that this team had some depth. We've done well with this team before we even got here. I really liked the team, and I knew that they could attract really, really good relationships and third parties to come in here and, make it happen with them. So it was about 6 or 8 months ago that Hilton came aboard. We're now a Hilton resort, which is a major deal. I mean, when you start talking about occupancy, you're talking about an organization that has 50 plus million Hilton Honors members. You're talking over 100 million active users. You get a marketing machine like that pointed at MBV. So the 55% growth that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, that's all happened despite the fact that there was never a brand on the island. When I say brand, I'm talking not even a Starbucks or a McDonald's, for sure no Hilton or Marriott. But you get a machine like that pointing at Mahogany Bay Village, we think that's going to be huge. So part of the resort is exclusive to Hilton. Just a few weeks ago, there was a new relationship with the Time family, Time Inc., the largest publisher in the United States. They have magazines like Sports Illustrated, like People, Star Wars, Coastal Living, and Street 4 now, another part of the resort, is going to be exclusive to Coastal Living. So now you've got another giant marketing machine that's pointing at MBV, Mahogany Bay Village, and we think it's going to be huge. In fact, it's been huge. Just in the last few weeks, we've seen a huge uptick of visitors and also people that are invested in the resort here.
Construction began there a few years ago at MBV, Mahogany Bay Village, and it was more of an independent standalone project. So since then, when you have people like Hilton and their global marketing power and their global knowledge and the Time Company, and they do their independent due diligence and they want a part of the product or they want to brand it with their name, that's the ultimate validation that you've done the right thing and you've invested in an up-and-coming market. So really, I think we're talking about an investment here, Dave, that's actually quite difficult for my listener to grasp and get an idea of what we're talking about here, more so than some other investments, unless they get there on the ground and actually see this thing. So you do have an opportunity for a field visit coming up.
Absolutely. And that, I would say, is the number one way to do the due diligence in this market. I've done this field trip probably 5 times myself, and I have sent a number of investors down here on the field trip. And it's the absolute best way, I feel, that you can get in and you can kind of do the due diligence, not only on the resort, but on the market itself. And you sit in the classroom for a few hours, you get on a boat, you travel up and down the Caribbean, you do the due diligence, kind of comp out different resorts, and you figure out, okay, so what's the cost to build a room in this resort, and what's the nightly rental, and what's the occupancy, and you gather all this information from the different resorts. Of course, you get to eat at some of the resorts and taste the local Belizean food, which is great, but you really want to do your due diligence. You're going offshore, you're bringing your hard-earned cash, and you want to invest into an offshore marketplace. I would highly encourage you to come down and do diligence yourself and come see this marketplace. And I know of no better way to do that than to join the guys here. And I have information about that right on our website where you can sign up. The next 3-day field trip for Belize is coming up on February 17th to the 20th. I'll be here on the ground. We look forward to it. I got a bunch of investors coming down on that one. We're looking forward to just hosting a really good group.
That is one of the more remarkable real estate tours I have ever been on because I did it myself a few years ago. You will visit this real estate market really with 3 modes of transportation. Number 1 is by foot, number 2 is by boat, and number 3 is by golf cart. Dave Zook, is there anything else our listeners can do to take action?
Yeah, so you can get more information on not only the field trip, but you can get a free market report on Belize. You can get our contact info by just simply going to our website at therealassetinvestor.com/GRE. If you go to that website, you'll be able to get a hold of us. Our email addresses are on there. You'll be able to get information on the market and also information on that field trip coming up. I'm looking forward to meeting some of your listeners down here and just hanging out. And I always enjoy getting around those folks.
Yeah, well, it's a remarkable way to kind of invest outside your own home country with training wheels on, and you diversify across product type, you diversify across your type of client served, and you diversify geographically all at the same time. Those resources, again, are at therealassetinvestor.com/GRE. Check that out, read that report, and consider going down there for the field trip. You know, the worst thing that can happen is you might decide that investing in that's not for you, but you know what? You're still going to have a great vacation. Dave Zook joining me right from Mahogany Bay Village today. Thanks so much for coming back on to Get Rich Education.
Thanks for having me on again, Keith. It was fun.
Yeah, well, great, Dave. You know, Dave follows whom is successful. Robert Helms and Russell Gray. They're the same people that introduced me to the resort a few years ago. And I've had other guests on the show here with me whom are also involved in Mahogany Bay Village. I guess really I'm pretty fortunate to have relationships with these people that are so genuine and knowledgeable. And I really do know these people. I've known Dave Zook for years. I most recently met up with he and his wife for breakfast in Lancaster County, PA a few months ago. There are now about 200 homes constructed there in the village now, going to about 300, still under construction, haven't yet had their full opening. Learn about a resort and hotel metric like REVPAR, REVPAR. REVPAR, that stands for revenue per available room, and that's how you evaluate this type of vacation property's performance over time. Say that a resort room rents for $100 a night. Say that's the going rate. Say that occupancy over, a given quarter is 85%. You would then say that the resort or hotel's REVPAR is $85. It's just $100 per night times 85% occupancy. I just want to really dispense one word of caution to the real estate investor that thinks they're going to buy a property and hold it for both the production of cash flow in the short to intermediate term, and then that might think they're also going to live there when they retire. Okay, although that might very well take place for you in an investment, it just really isn't common that one property is going to best fit both use types for you. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap, okay? Even if you like Ambergris Caye, Belize, you just don't know what you're really going to want 30 years from now when it's time to retire in a place, okay? So I guess I would just say that if you hold a property for cash flow in the near term and you do end up getting a lot of personal use out of it over time, that's fantastic. But for most people, it should primarily make sense as a cash flowing rental for you. And just consider any personal use as a bonus more so than an expectation. I guess that's the best way that I can say it. And this development is just really well thought out, from the fact that it's in an English-speaking nation to the fact that canals were built to make the water more proximate to the dwelling units so that there's a potential for a boat that can pick you up right there from your unit for your fishing, snorkeling, or diving tour. You've got Mayan ruins and jungle on the mainland that are also a boat ride away. And yeah, I mean, really no wonder you've got government officials that are so supportive of the project. The project not only brings tourism, but with the nature, the character of development, they're not stripping the culture there. They've sourced the product at Mahogany Bay Village, not with concrete, but with Belizean hardwood, Belizean products, and they've also employed Belizean labor. So in a sense, they're not stripping the culture, they're upholding it. So I really encourage you to visit this market, unlike a domestic turnkey market where I think it's just kind of easier for you to understand it since it more likely resembles where you live. I think it's more important in this case. So, all right, well, we finally did a show on the special opportunity at Mahogany Bay Village on Ambergris Caye, Belize here today. I thought that would have happened a lot sooner than here in the 122nd episode. At the least, go to therealassetinvestor.com/GRE, check out the report, and I hope you can have a great time at their field trip from the 17th to the 20th of this month. And Dave can give you a great introduction to a pretty fascinating market. Thanks for being here, but as always, you weren't here for me, you were here for you. Next week, I'll be coming to you from San Juan, Puerto Rico to help you build your wealth. Now go out there and don't quit your tropical daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Cash flow real estate investors nationwide and worldwide, this is Get Rich Education's Keith Weinhold. Forbes has rated Memphis, Tennessee as the #1 cash flowing market in the world. Our good friends at Mid-South Homebuyers have been Memphis's premier turnkey real estate provider for 14 years with a stellar reputation and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Owner Terry Kerr was born and raised in Memphis. Yeah, he knows the market and has renovated and sold over 1,000 houses in the Memphis area. Find out what their many repeat buyers already know. Their houses are completely renovated, even come with a 1-year builder's warranty and a lifelong rental guarantee. They're a perfect fit for the first-time out-of-state investor or the seasoned investor diversifying their portfolio. Mid-South Homebuyers' friendly staff makes investing easy. Learn more at midsouthhomebuyers.com or give them a call at 901-217-HOME. The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.